You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Thanks for joining us this week. This series I've been running recently really focuses around what's happening in our industry, trying to grab the pulse of what's happening. Things are a little bit off kilter, I feel, and I think most people know that. You look at retail sales, they're okay. We see a lot of people trimming back. We see a lot of people being a little bit more conservative about their approach to business right now. I think maybe it's the election year, maybe there's just a number, maybe it's coming off these huge years that we had, where maybe we're just collecting our breaths really quickly, which I never do because I never stop talking. But I think it behooves us just to pause and have some conversations with different segments and different people who have been in the industry for a long time and have really interesting perspectives to help us see what's happening and where we're heading. And one of those people is a dear friend of mine, Chris Hillyer. Chris has been on the show before in the past, focused around innovation in particular. And I think that's his kind of MO, is looking at problems and challenges in a different way, in a different light, and providing real value to footwear companies. So Chris, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you.
How have you been?
Great. I was just telling you before the show, I just got back from Hong Kong. It's been honestly my first trip back there since the COVID shutdown, and my wife's been going there quite a bit, but it was my first time over there. It's interesting to see how much it's changed. I think anyone that's been in the footwear industry has spent a lot of time in Asia, and seeing that evolve is a pretty telling element to where the footwear industry is going as well.
Yeah. How did you find the mood in Hong Kong? Because prior to COVID, you and I both spent a lot of time there together as well at different events and different shows. But obviously at that time, Hong Kong was rather autonomous in some ways, a little bit more independent. Now China has much more control over it. So how did you find the mood of Hong Kong? And then both in terms of that, but also just the economics. Is there like nervousness or anything?
Yeah, Hong Kong's still a beautiful, bustling city with great restaurants, and it's a lovely place to go visit. I think that the big change for me is the attitude of taxi drivers and pretty much people that live there that are feeling it. It wasn't affecting me so much, but I think it's just this underlying dialogue from inhabitants or locals that are like, it's not the place it used to be. So it didn't really overtly feel different. There's still plenty of Cartier shops to visit. So it doesn't feel depressed by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's just you're just hearing from people that it's different. And I think that's interesting.
It is interesting because it's important, because a lot of footwear companies have set up headquarters, their Asia headquarters in Hong Kong or just across in Dongguan or in that area. And if you get your sourcing folks there feel it at some unease or some sense, then you start looking elsewhere, maybe more towards Vietnam, or maybe you keep it there. I don't know, but it's important to get a pulse for how that feels.
I'm not old enough to have experienced the footwear industry pre-Hong Kong, right? So as we all know, I put up air quotes, but they were too narrow. But as we all know, the footwear, when we started producing footwear in Asia, we went to places. The first places we went were Japan, Korea, eventually Taiwan, and then a lot of Taiwanese manufacturers shifted into China, which was pretty much when Hong Kong became where all of the agents set up. That's where all the large manufacturers set up their sourcing offices. There's been tax reasons for companies to be located in Hong Kong, even within the last decade. Hong Kong's always played a huge part in my career as far as where footwear happens. It's shifting. So I think we're seeing large manufacturers, as I don't think we need to focus on it, but I think we all know that there's a large sucking sound coming out of China from a manufacturing standpoint. But by doing so, we are so ingrained in manufacturing in China. So we may have sample rooms or countless material suppliers that are just like, we don't have the appetite to just pick up and move again. Like, we're either going to do this until the end and then shut down. So there is this interesting situation happening where we know for a fact that a lot's happening in China, both economically as well as from a manufacturing side, and everyone's leaving. There's no secret about that. So that's happening. So now we're talking, obviously Vietnam's not new news. So where footwear is manufactured is a little bit open, and it surely does not have the infrastructure necessary to build the shoes the way we built them in China. And so I think for this conversation, I think a great important thing to talk about, at least for you, is how do people transition? And what does that look like? And if we're expecting to make exactly the same shoes that we were making in China in India, they're not ready, and it's going to be different. And so even when we started into Vietnam, and I remember that quite well, is literally trucks carrying components or materials 24 hours a day, driving from China to Vietnam to provide the infrastructure necessary because Vietnam didn't have it. Now Vietnam's building that up, but Vietnam is no China. So it's a very different, it's all quite different. It's actually pretty exciting to see all of this transition. But if people are expecting it to be the same, I think they will be caught off guard.
That's interesting. Does that mean that as sourcing shifts, you think about how you change your shoe types or change your development of the footwear to match the capacity?
It depends. That's an open question. It depends on what you're making. It depends on how you're doing it, what your infrastructure is, what the type of product you're making, the quantities that you make, everything. So I can't answer that. Yeah. Yes, I guess is your answer.
Well, if we had the answer, we'd be as rich as Elon Musk, right? So we'd be the top shoe dogs at that point. But yeah,
he just was dethroned yesterday.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to keep happening. So we'll see. I'm always interested because your background, you worked at Deckers for many years, and obviously Deckers now, if you look at where they're at and the product launches and things like that, but you've worked on really interesting projects in footwear. You've worked on 3D and digitalization, setting up those shared services inside Deckers just to create more speed to market and more customer engagement. But you've also worked on product launches. You worked on Hoka and some of those other things, looking at little meticulous things about product. And I'm just wondering in today's environment, because I'll get your opinion too, because now you're consulting for different brands and different folks. It feels like we're a little conservative when we're allocating capital right now for innovation. I don't know if you feel that way, but it seems like whereas a couple of years ago, maybe we weren't as cautious. Now we're very cautious. I don't know. How do you look at the innovation landscape right now?
Andy, I can't provide an easy answer to that. I think that I was at Deckers yesterday. Deckers is prospering. They're investing deeply in innovation. I had a meeting with a new VP of innovation yesterday. He blew me off, but we rescheduled to next week. But there's tremendous innovation investment going on at Deckers. So I can't say that a blanket across the board. What I will say is that not every footwear company had an innovation team 10 years ago, and I think they all do now. So that's an investment in innovation. I think that we also need to define what innovation is. I had a meeting actually with Jean-Luc Daard, who I worked for many years. He's the founder of Hoka and had been leading innovation for Deckers for many years. We talked a couple weeks ago, actually right before I left for Hong Kong, about innovation is too broad of a topic to nail this all down. So when we're saying people they're not investing in it, I disagree. I think that I like to think of innovation under 3 pillars. You have obviously product, trying to build a faster running shoe, making a lighter foam, making a better product, making something that fits better, has better traction, better comfort, better, etc. More waterproof, more breathable, whatever you're looking to do. And then you have process, which I think that we've all done. I think that's actually one of the fun ones that people don't think is sexy enough to put attention to, but that's I think one place, that's where digitalization and what our strategy is for whether it's nearshoring or or molding things that used to be made by hand, or 3D printing, or all these different concepts of how we might be building something in the future or even designing something in the future. That falls under process. And then we have planet, which I think this environmental impact, and I know you've been spending a lot of time just trying to organize how the industry approaches that. That's a very difficult one and very personal for every company to navigate, but I think it requires its own pillar. So to say that companies aren't putting emphasis towards that, not true. I think that we've seen far more, at least, interest in trying to come up with solutions for that than we've ever seen, even though it's been a topic for my entire life. To say that the industry now cares about the environment is false. Like when I started at Deckers, we had the Simple brand. I'd never seen anyone putting so much emphasis on putting attention towards the packaging and how the shoelaces were built and how the outsoles were done and caring and putting things together. It's unfortunately always been a challenge to get that all the way to the customer and have the customer vote for that. And so that's been a very difficult transition just because of that. But anyway, I think that to say that companies aren't investing in innovation is false. I think they are. I think that almost every company that you work with is publicly held, and it's a business before it's anything else. So is one thing that has always been challenging with innovation is ROI. So how does making a more environmentally sustainable product affect your bottom line? And I think a lot of great leaders, Dave Powers being one of them. I love Deckers, so I say great things about them all the time just because I had such a great experience working with them and continue to. But I think that Deckers makes a lot of decisions about the environment, despite what the ROI might be. And I think that's the right thing to do. But that takes a lot of leadership and confidence. And sometimes your business has to be having success to even have the confidence to make those decisions. But I will say that when businesses are challenged, innovation teams go away real quick. And projects that maybe the ROI is a little bit muddy, like 3D, are some of the first things to go because, is it truly changing the ROI of the business? It all makes sense. Maybe it looks sexy. It seems like the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, is it making the company more profitable? And unfortunately, when you have shareholders, that's your first, that's the first expectation of a leader.
Yeah, let's talk about digitization because we've been talking about that for many years, and there's some companies that are doing it and doing quite well at it, and then there's others who have tried it and then went away from it. Is your point basically that it's hard to show dollars and cents when you're just cutting off process times?
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're still in an age where the existing process is so quick, and with factories not charging you overtly for samples, you pay for samples, but you don't feel it, you don't see it. I think if those things continue, if those behaviors continue, then digitalization is a tricky thing to sell because it's very expensive and it requires the change of behavior of your entire organization. The upside, as I think it's easy for everyone to know, is you have a lot better understanding of your product from before it's made. So you can visualize, you can understand, you can develop something before you engage in a factory. But we're so intertwined with the factories and they turn out samples real quick and you have to build a sample eventually anyway. So I think that it's a little bit difficult to just flip a switch. And for sure, it's not the ROI is not evident. No one's going to tell you that it's cheaper to make something in 3D because it's not.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, it's difficult for organizations to buy into it. And for sure, very few, if any, organizations are 100% using a 3D development process.
Yeah.
When you make airplanes and cars, something that has obviously a huge engineering requirement, it's far more efficient because you can solve a lot of problems and you can figure a lot of stuff out without having to build an airplane and crash it to discover that it did something wrong. So I don't know. I just had a conversation with someone about basically engineering a shoe as you would engineer an airplane, for instance. So we have something in engineering called finite element analysis. So it gives you the opportunity to fly an airplane virtually, basically. So based on how you design a wing profile, it'll tell you how much lift it produces. Stuff that had been invented by, I think, Dassault Systems back in the 60s, 70s. That was first adopted by big companies like Boeing and whatnot that were making these multi-million-dollar projects, a lot of military, etc. And so basically these finite element analysis software systems are able to, that's what everybody's using, whether it's a Formula One team to find out if the car is faster than last year, or whether it's the military trying to figure out if a bullet is going to bounce off a helmet or go right through it. They use these systems. You can do it with footwear, but it starts to get so complicated. So people are just like, oh, we got to model a shoe. And then you have to model a human. And then you have to model their interface on how they land. And so everyone lands differently. So you're going to model one person, or you're going to try to like blah, blah, blah. And so by the time you get into that, you're just like, why don't we just build a sample and see if it works or not? So it's those things. And this is what's cool about footwear is it's so easy to iterate and try stuff. And it doesn't cost a fortune to open a mold and try something. And we do it all the time to experiment, but it's far from scientific. So this whole digitalization thing comes down is basically we're visualizing. And unless you're actually interacting with, okay, we've built every single component that's going to go into this product in 3D, which is a tremendous amount of work because it's obviously you're not building boxes and drilling holes. It's like everything is very sculpted and three-dimensional, and it's fashion. So everyone has an opinion on whether you've done it correctly or if it looks perfect or not. And then what you're gonna have to then assign every single component on that to a material, but we don't have any digital materials to do that with. So that's a piece of this whole thing that is missing in our industry is we don't even know who all of our suppliers are. And then what do you do with it? And then you flatten it all out, and are you actually going to use those to pattern the product? It's probably not. Like the factory will probably get that, and it might influence them greatly as far as how they're going to build the product. And they surely would have tremendous transparency as to all of the different components involved, but it's not their process. So they're going to tear it apart and decide that some of it's wrong, and they're going to redo it anyway. So it starts getting a little bit tricky that way. Where digitalization, or at least 3D shoes, make a whole lot of sense is for sure if you have an existing silhouette in your collection and you want to visualize it in different materials and colors all day long. And if you're not doing that, it's probably time to get on board, because that's the low-hanging fruit. Because most footwear companies at least have carryovers that they're doing material ups, color ups on, and it's tremendously efficient. Yeah. In the same way, in the apparel world, if you make T-shirts in Adobe Illustrator and are putting new graphics on those T-shirts and making $1 million decisions as to whether that's the right thing to sample, it's like, you should get a copy of Adobe Substance today and visualize those in photographic reality as to what that's going to look like, and cut down on your samples today. But that's low hanging fruit. So the big idea in digitalization, that's still a slow roll. That's tough. And that's what we try to do. And honestly, Mitch Harvey, who you know is still leading that at Deckers and having amazing headway, and especially with brands like Hoka, which have an appetite for pushing, is from a design standpoint and from a digitalization standpoint, they're taking advantage of it, and that's great. As are the other brands there. And I can't speak in the same amount of detail about others, but you're right. Some people are backing out of it for the sole reason is you're paying for extra people, and if the ROI is not evident or obvious, then that's tricky.
AI has been the biggest topic and buzzword, and anything else you want to say about it over the last six months, maybe a year at least, where companies it's curious because I think socially people are afraid of it because it may take jobs. It seems to lie in certain instances. So what's the truth and what's not? So socially we have a lot of angst as we go through this kind of, I would say, almost a generational shift in computing technology. How do you talk to executives and footwear people about AI that is rational and can be meaningful today for their business, not like pie in the sky buzzword stuff.
Yeah, I think that I think people that are afraid of it are a little short-sighted. I think we had a conversation about this. When was that? Last summer or something?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if you expect someone to be policing this and preventing it, you're out of luck. This is coming. It's already there. People are already using it. Everybody's trying to figure out how to set up these systems and whatnot. It's still early days. It's like literally the dawn of AI from a visual standpoint. Sorry, my dogs might be making some noise. But yeah, so I think that from that standpoint, where AI is wonderful, I think that we've already seen and been amazed at what's come out of AI. But I think at the end, but for people like me who want to solve footwear problems and make better product, I don't think AI is truly solving actual fundamental issues. Not to say it couldn't. I think that I believe there is a future for sure of leveraging AI to help you navigate some challenges, but we are not in that phase of AI today. It's truly making pretty pictures, and it's able to do some amazing stuff. I don't know if you're not familiar with it. There's a couple software platforms that are now able to basically take sketches and turn them into photoreal versions of that product. But it still is taking inputs and mixing them up and coming out with something on the other end. So if you're not good at drawing and communicating an idea, AI could be a wonderful way of improving that. If you're looking for generating thousands of different color variations because you want to enhance your color team, then AI is going to solve that. So I think I think in the near future, you're going to take an image of one of your products and AI will show you 1,000 variations from a color and material standpoint of what that product could be without you having to do that manually, which I think is for people that like to look at pictures and make decisions off that, which I think most of us in the industry would say is probably the way that we would want to do it anyway. Like, how great would it be to have 1,000 photographs of a product in different configurations and make a call off one? Great. Mm-hmm. It's not going to write the spec. It's not going to make sure that those materials are satisfactory to make a shoe out of from a durability or costing or any other parameter. So you still need to build something. You still need experienced shoe people to look at it and navigate that and decide if it's the right thing to do. But if you're trying to pick colors, great. If you have a design team that wants to generate 1,000 variations of something for inspiration, fantastic. That's great. But it doesn't make your shoe lighter, faster, better traction, better breathability, etc. Like before, that's the kind of stuff that I like to work on.
Yeah. So what would that be for our industry? What are we lacking, or what's the next innovative epic? Because I think
to solve those problems,
to solve one specific problem, what would it be? Is it more comfort? Is it lighter shoes?
And maybe I'm old. Maybe I'm too old. But I don't think AI is going to solve those problems.
Yeah. But generally, if you were working on a project right now, what most interests you to solve for a footwear product yourself?
I love solving all sorts of different problems. And so you look at what's gone on with running in the last decade, and this has been one of the most exciting times in the footwear industry. If you are interested in running shoes, we've seen the entire industry just flip upside down. When I was a runner at University of Washington, if you wanted to run fast, you were going to put on the most minimal, lightest product with barely any cushioning, and because there was a weight penalty to cushioning, and that's what you were going to wear. And just with what Hoka has done, and Hoka, one of Hoka's big secrets, obviously it was originally the design of the Hoka was to make running downhill more fun because it used to hurt. Still hurts a little bit, but it hurts less. But to see where that's transcended, and the genius of it all is that, and I still remember Jean-Luc presenting this to, we had a little we had a little show and tell with Boulder Running Company years ago. We were introducing a new model, and he and I were giving a presentation. And one thing that he said is, if you feel better at the end of a marathon, you're going to win. And I just loved how simple that was. It's like you go out there and beat each other up for an hour and a half. And it's like the person that is less beat up is probably the person that's going to win. And having cushioning fundamentally does that. And you see the shift of even what Nike did. Nike obviously making marathon winning running shoes forever. When they started adopting a higher profile, more cushioned product, it changed the world. Yeah. And I think that's amazing. What a wonderful story for us to have experienced in our careers, to see all of this transition. So how are we gonna build the faster shoe going forward? It's a lot of things, I think, still to play with. How the foot transitions, how the foot. One thing that I keep on talking about is we have all these super shoes for breaking marathon records, but where are the super shoes for the everyday runner? To think that the only people that deserve a $250 like carbon fiber plated super shoe are the people that weigh 98 pounds that are trying to break records. It's like, why aren't we engineering shoes for the people that also have $250 that are trying to be as comfortable as possible running their first marathon? So that's the kind of stuff, and it's happening, for sure. It's happening. So that's the stuff that I get excited about, is how it's going to transform everything. And then just as this new brand that Deckers launched named Anu, it's taking all of these same philosophies about building lightweight uppers that are breathable, building amazing cushioning platforms, using carbon fiber plates for energy efficiency or transition, or to maintain the geometry of the midsole, and leveraging that for everyday sneakers. And that's the kind of trickle down that I think Deckers has been hoping for since the day it bought Hoka. And now we're starting to see that influenced throughout the entire portfolio. And I think that we're going to see that throughout the entire industry. If you're making a shoe that's not comfortable today, it's like, shame on you. So we now have the materials and the processes and the ability to make things lighter and more comfortable. So when I go shopping, and my wife and I are both in the industry, so we shop all the time, and we're always looking at new stuff. And when it's heavy and when it's hard, I chuckle I'm like, how can we still allow this in our industry? And yet it's still out there every day. So there's lots to be done.
I have a just from my own curiosity, and I don't know if you worked on the project or not or whatever, but more broadly, the development of a new brand, right? Even in Deckers, where you've got Hoka, you have these different brand types of shoes that you can take learnings from to develop something internally. It still has to take several years to put together a new brand. Obviously, what's the ethos? What are we trying to solve? Who's the customer base? But even developing the product type, how long does it, from an innovation standpoint, does that take to develop a new brand shoe like that? Because I think some consumer may think, 6 months, they just took this, they took that. But there's a lot of testing and a lot of...
It's not the first time. So, I mean, we don't need to get into strategically why Deckers is doing it. But as far as like putting new product out there with a new brand, it's like, it's not, Deckers is an engine. It's like they have a very mature sourcing and manufacturing network. So if it really just comes down to what's it take to order samples and put together marketing, it's like, that doesn't have to be so complicated. So I think that, and I love the way that they've done it. It's a very hybrid approach as far as leadership and the talent that's involved in that project. They're borrowing from other divisions. They're fitting it into their network. And again, I'm not involved in it, so I can't really speak to it firsthand, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated to do this. It's less complicated than an apparel company trying to get into shoes. I'll tell you.
Amen to that. Plenty of those folks. We always see the cycles where someone will do private label or someone will jump in because they're like, why aren't we doing this? And then they get out of it and realize why they weren't doing it to begin with. As we wrap up today, and it's great just chatting with you about this stuff casually, but what are you most curious about right now around footwear innovation or software or anything. What's piqued your interest over the last couple of months? That's really interesting.
Oh, I think that we're seeing a tremendous amount of material development on the 3D side. So I think it's actually starting. I think there's something there, but it's also that's an open-ended conversation just because it's not what we all had in mind as far as what that would be. The big 3D printing story had always been Adidas with their interest in carbon 3D printed midsoles, which was presented to the world as a paradigm shift in performance. So that was a running midsole technology that they were investing in that was promised to bring us better cushioning and personalized cushioning eventually. And when that didn't work out, it turned into a fashion play, which is where it remains today on sale. And it looks amazing, but it was also, I think it was generation one, unfortunately, of what we're going to see. I'm excited to see not only how something like that, they're able to actually print foams now, like they're putting a little bit of a foaming agent into the polymer. So as it's printed, it foams up a little bit. So we're seeing lighter parts that are potentially going to give you characteristics that we haven't been able to do with 3D printed parts yet. They're still built one by one. It's super, super expensive, even by anyone's stretch of the imagination. And I think at the end of the day, are they any better than a piece of foam? Nope, not yet. So it's like people keep plugging away, but I think they're also they're also looking for the grand slam. They're trying to find a better cushioning system, which we've been trying to find better cushioning systems for my entire life. So I don't know if it's going to be the grand slam that's going to change the industry. And I think not enough people are maybe looking around the corner as to what are other things that we could be doing with this that are even cooler. And one of them, I think, is customization, which was part of the promise. Like one thing that like nothing aggravates me more than using a technology like 3D printing and then trying to make it into some sort of industrialized replacement for injection molding or something like that. So if you're 3D printing something, every single component can be different, right? That's one of the beauties of 3D printing is the printer doesn't care that whether it's making the same part over and over or a different one. And that's why we see it revolutionize the dentistry and orthodontic world by being able to scan teeth and print parts and all these Invisaligns and all these other technologies. That's all because we were able to make every single one differently without molds and everything else. So when we see 3D printed parts and they're like, yeah, we're going to print thousands of these things exactly the same, that turns my stomach. That's the wrong way to address this. I guess my answer in a roundabout way, because I like to talk just as much as you do, is that where I see some opportunity in this footwear world is with trying to build shoes that fit like an actual individual, which I think if we think about, it's like when you think about dentistry, it's if that doesn't fit your body, your mouth perfectly, it's going to be horrible. And yet we've been wearing shoes that were not designed for us as individuals for our entire lives. And we don't even, I don't know, there's hardly anybody on the planet that's experienced shoes that were built for them. And I think that's a big area of excitement for me. Like, how are we going to start doing that? So it's traditionally basketball players where they don't have shoes because no company makes them big enough. So they get custom shoes. It's not necessarily they don't even know what shoes are supposed to feel like because they've never had a pair that fit at all. I think when we start getting into that, that's really exciting for me, whether it's from a performance standpoint or just because we eventually have the tools to do that. So I think that's something that I'm very excited about playing around with all sorts of different angles, but there's no easy path for how to do that. It
sounds like your dog's also very excited about that. So that's good. You got the validation that.
they're so chill all day, and then they just wait for like a conference call or something, and then they.
I think that's just the world we live in, right? I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, "I'm so sorry, my Zoom or my whatever didn't work." I'm like, no one has to apologize anymore. We all know, right? It's a given that 4 out of 10 calls you're going to have some computer glitch, and it's okay. It's not a problem. So
yeah, every time.
I like that. I like that to wrap up our conversation of something that people can think about a little bit.
But I think there's unfortunately, we're also living during this crazy transition into people trying to be more considerate as to the environment. And so I think that we are in the age of hypocrisy when we're building running shoes to last one race, and out of the same press release, or at least from the same office, you're trying to save the planet. So I think that we have a little bit of soul searching as far as what we want to do. And I think that making high performance running shoes that don't last very long is the opposite of trying to be more considerate for the planet. And I think I think every corporation needs to really think about what they're building and how they're doing it. So I don't have the answer. I think that it's obvious that if the customers wanted to truly save the planet and they were going to vote with their dollars, they'd be buying different shoes. And it's always been available. So we can build shoes that last a lot longer than the shoes that we buy today. That's one way to do that. But I don't think there's a large amount of people that are attempting to change their behavior to do that. I think fast fashion, as much as aware as people are to how challenging that is for the environment, I don't think they're slowing down as far as purchasing.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. It is a challenge to work on the sustainability issues without being able to show a consumer willing to spend a little bit more for you to be able to choose better materials and processes. It is a tough situation.
I don't even think we need to talk about the shoes costing more. It's if the shoes don't look exactly the way that they want them to look, or they don't feel, or they don't. We are such advanced consumers at this point. Our expectations are so incredibly high, and our thirst for newness is so unquenchable that it makes it it is the perfect storm. It makes it extremely difficult. I remember a good friend who, when the iPhone came out, I have a phone that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. That's what he said. That's what he believed. It's like that product was so perfect that there was no reason for him to ever consider upgrading until the new one came out in 12 months, and has probably bought a new one every single year. And so I think that we buy these things thinking of and cherish them as being so special in our life. But my parents, they wore the same damn shoes every day. And I'm not that old. And just in one generation, it's like our appetite for having newness is ridiculous.
Yeah. So Guns N' Roses had it right. Appetite for destruction and renewal of things. Chris, thanks for dropping by and just chatting, because I think a lot of times some of the best conversations are just ad hoc and friends chatting about what's happening to try to grasp these things and these changes that are taking place. And I always appreciate how thoughtful you are about broad strokes of what's happening, but also meticulous little details that you have. And if folks out there are working on something meticulous or something really curious that you're looking for some help on, I know Chris, I don't want to speak for him, but Chris takes these projects on from time to time and might be able to assist. And if you're interested in chatting with him, just drop me a line and I can connect you with Chris, because I think it's one of those things where someone with a different mindset or a different set of eyes can help solve a problem that will add a lot of value to what you're doing. And yes, probably cut costs or whatever, but it's just a lot of fun, I think, to work on innovation stuff. And it can be frustrating, but the highs are really high, I think, Chris, when you can solve something. Yeah.
I love this industry. I don't know. I just watched that. I think it was HBO just did a little series. I don't think it's even new, but I just watched it on the plane about Tiger Woods. And the thing that one thing that I took away is how much fun golfers have. I don't play golf, but it was amazing to see just how joyful these athletes were about their day or whatever. And so I come from an endurance athlete world where we feel awful when we're exercising. We're also proud of our pain cave and how terrible it feels and how we transcend and whatever. But I think that's how I feel about the footwear industry, is that I think a lot of jobs are arduous, and we get to work on stuff that's super fun, that's ever changing, and these landscapes and the opportunities to work with different machines and different materials and different tools and different solutions. And yeah, I think all of us, people that I talk to in the industry, I think we relish in these opportunities to try to do things differently and to be able to, build things that even billionaires get excited about, a pair of new shoes, which is amazing to me.
I welcome you to join my walking club. You don't have to do the running club anymore. And typically, Polk's walking club is walking to the supper club. So it extends out. You get your reward at the end of it. You don't have to feel terrible. Only when you look at the scales. That's it. But if you don't have scales, there's no problem, right?
There's no problem. You look great, Andy.
Don't look for problems, buddy. It's great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time and for all your help and guidance on different things that we work on internally at FDRA to try to help the industry. Your perspective's always welcome. Folks, shoeandshow.com is the website. It's our full catalog. We talk to a range of people in our industry on a lot of different topics. The focus of this podcast is to help people think a little bit differently about what they're doing. And help strengthen the industry. So I hope you got something out of this. Again, if you want to talk to Chris, drop me a line and I'm happy to connect you with him, because I think anytime you can hear from Chris, people like our friend Stuart, who's running Blue Maka now, Nico, there's a whole group of people who are really interesting, thoughtful, innovative people that just a conversation can make a big difference in our industry. Appreciate you listening as always. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.